So I don't know about you guys, but the Flash movie isn't doing well, to say the least, with the critical reception being very mixed and not making too much money at the box office for obvious reasons, with these being either because it's before DC's next big reboot or because of, well, you know. Anyway, since this film isn't doing too well, I decided to make this video and tell you guys what I would have done personally with the film, the changes I would make to the story, and stuff I would keep from the original film. Now, as we all know, this film is based on one of the Flash's most popular storylines, that being Geoff Johns' 2011 story Flashpoint, where Comic Flash basically does what the Arrowverse Flash likely does on a weekly basis, fucking up the timeline. And while Christina Hodson did adapt that storyline very well, she did it in a way that paid homage to the history of DC films, which I do really respect, especially the scene with Nick Cage's Superman. That was a really nice callback and a nice touch. But Hodson also stuck to the bare bones of the story, that being Barry goes back in time and alters history, coming back to a new world that's different than what he knew. Now look, I get why the story was changed a lot. The movie has been in development hell since 2014, I think, with directors dropping out left and right. And then Ezra Miller's rampage through the state of Hawaii likely didn't help this and put the movie's release into question. So when coming up with how I would rewrite this movie, here's what I would do. Now, I would still very much stick to the bare bones of the story with Barry changing the timeline, but here's what I would do.
You are?
Yeah. I'm Batman.
Now, in my opinion, Andy Muschietti handled Batman as a character very well. Affleck's Batman, I felt, was utilised pretty well and was a good send-off to that version of the character. I also personally loved how Michael Keaton's Batman was handled in this movie, because not only did you get the gadgets and the vehicles on point, but the action is very Arkham-esque and makes me excited to see what Muschietti will do with the character in Brave and the Bold. And while it was great to see him in this movie, he's not the Batman I wanted to see.
Little pig, let me in.
Sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel leads to hell.
That's right, instead of Michael Keaton's Batman, I will be taking the comic accuracy route and using Jeffrey Dean Morgan's Thomas Wayne, aka Flashpoint Batman. Now, I'm sure that I'm not in the minority of DC fans here who would have loved to see Thomas Wayne Batman played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan on the big screen. Now, in my version of this movie, JDM replaces Keaton's Batman, and I would add in 2 scenes to this movie just to flesh out this version of the character. The first one being a flashback to the night that Bruce was killed. Now, for context, Bruce Wayne in the Flashpoint timeline dies in Crime Alley as opposed to his parents, which sends them down their respective paths. Thomas Wayne becomes Batman and Martha became Joker, so yeah. Plus, Lauren Cohan played Martha Wayne in BVS, so that would be pretty cool to see them reunited outside of the Walking Dead universe. The second scene would take place before Thomas and the 2 Barrys go to break Kara out of prison. This scene would see Thomas give Barry a letter he's written for Bruce saying that if they don't make it out of this alive, then fix things and give this to Bruce.
Now I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you?
Now, other than Barry, we do get a few other DCEU characters in this film, with these being Affleck's Batman, who I mentioned earlier, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, and Jason Momoa's Aquaman in the post-credit sequence. Now, this movie was being worked on in the midst of the delays and a global pandemic, so I can understand that a lot of stuff had to be tweaked and changed as things went on. Now, I'm actually happy with how Momoa, Godot and Affleck were utilised in this movie respectively, but the only thing I would change is the addition of Henry Cavill's Superman. Now, while I'm aware that he was in one of the cut endings, but in my version, I would add in a scene where Barry visits Clark on his family farm, where he's now living with Lois, and maybe we can have a reference to Jonathan Kent. Now, this would be similar to the scene Barry has with Affleck's Bruce earlier in the movie. In my head, this scene would be set directly after. And Clark actually knows how Barry feels, since this version of Cal lost his dad and felt powerless to stop it. Now, Clark says that he thinks about flying around the earth until he reaches the day his dad died, but he says to himself it's not right, because his father is one of the things that drives him to save people, and Barry should do the same thing, using his mother as his drive to save people. Now, this doesn't impact Barry's decision, but I wanted to include Cavill in here somehow because he honestly deserved better. Now, in the Flashpoint universe, Kal-El doesn't crash land in Kansas, but rather smack bang in the middle of Metropolis, and he's taken to a government facility. The movie does something similar, with the Kara Zor-El being held in a Siberian government facility where her pod was discovered, in Siberia. Now, I would like to keep this in the movie because using Kara instead of Cal is a fairly good choice for the story and helps differentiate things from the comics a little. So in my version of the movie, Thomas and the two Barrys break Supergirl out of prison as opposed to breaking out a very, very thin version of Cal. Now, The Flash has two villains, the first one being General Zod from Man of Steel, which I don't necessarily have a problem with because Michael Shannon did a good job in this movie. However, the second villain, that being the so-called Dark Flash, is literally on screen for no more than 2 minutes, which kind of wastes him as a character. Not Ezra Miller, Dark Flash, the character. So I'm going to go down a route that I'm sure a lot of you guys would have loved seeing in this movie.
Break the sound barrier and there's a sonic boom. You broke the time barrier, Flash. Time boom. Ripples of distortion radiated out to that point of impact, shifting everything just a tiny bit, but enough.
The Reverse Flash is one of Barry Allen's greatest enemies, sorry Captain Cold, and if James Gunn does have a future in mind for the Flash, then I hope Eobard Thawne has a place in it. Now, you can probably tell where I'm going with this, where I replace Dark Flash with Eobard Thawne in the story, but given that Dark Flash appears on screen for 2 minutes, I'm instead going to rewrite the entire ending of the movie. So, without further ado, here's my version of the ending and what I would do to end this film and tie it into Gunn's DCU, and my changes occurred just before Zod kills Supergirl, just to give you some context. So, Zod is about to kill Kara and extract the Codex when suddenly his ship is blown out of the sky by what looks like red lightning. Batman and the Flashes both look on in shock, but just then, the 2013 Barry's neck gets snapped and Thomas is knocked out as this lightning runs past them both. Our version of Barry is literally lost for words when this man in yellow stops in front of him, revealing a speedster in the opposite colours to Barry. This man in yellow also incapacitates Zod and his remaining soldiers as well, and then he reveals himself as Eobard Thawne, explaining he was from the original timeline, but he was in the Speed Force when the timeline was altered, and also reveals that he was the one that sent Barry to this alternate timeline. The two exchange some blows and Barry ends up on the floor. Eobard explains that because he's not tied to Barry anymore, he is now a living paradox and can kill him without any repercussions to himself or his own timeline. However, just when he's about to do it, a gunshot rings out and Eobard falls to the floor. Barry looks to see a bloodied and bruised Thomas Wayne, who falls to the floor but utters the words, "Save us please," before dying. Just then, Zod's ship initiates a countermeasure where the energy core, which has more destructive force than a fucking nuke, blows up and Barry races away from the explosion, which incinerates the remaining troops and Supergirl in the process. Barry runs through the Speed Force, and this is where, at least in my rewrite, we would see all the cameos from the other Superman, Batman, and other DC characters. This is also where I would throw in a cameo from Grant Gustin's version of Barry, who runs alongside the DCEU version and gives him the boost he needs to set things right. And it works. DCEU Barry runs faster than ever as the screen fades to white. Barry then wakes up at home where he gets a call from Iris, who says that his dad's appeal is today. Barry gets dressed in his courtroom attire and we find out that he made a new change in the past, creating evidence in the present day that proves Henry's innocence. Following this, we see Barry look in a mirror and notice that the changes he made have also altered his appearance into that of Lucas Till for some reason. And just then, a very expensive car pulls up and multiple reporters surround the man, stepping out. Now, Barry and the audience of course know who this is, but there's something different about this Bruce. As Bruce walks into frame, we see that it is none other than Jensen Ackles of all people. Bruce asks if Barry's okay as the screen cuts to black, and it's kind of implied that his dad does get the appeal, he wins and gets released. Right, I hope you all enjoyed that rewritten ending. I feel like this works better because there's no confusion with the timeline, and it ties in directly to James Gunn's new DCU without changing anything too major with his plans. However, that does bring to a close this video on the Flash movie, and if you did enjoy it, then be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.